My mother-in-law placed an empty plate in front of me at Thanksgiving dinner. Not a plate with small portions, not a plate with the less desirable cuts. An empty plate. White ceramic with a tiny chip on the edge, the same plates she'd used for 30 years, completely bare. The rest of the family had turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, the works. I had porcelain and silence. "I only cooked for family," she said, loud enough for everyone to hear. "You understand." I looked at that empty plate, then at my husband Derek, who was staring at his own full plate like it might save him from having to react, then at his father, who suddenly found the ceiling fascinating, then back at his mother, Patricia, who was smiling that tight smile she'd perfected over 4 years of making my life miserable. I smiled back. "Of course," I said. "I understand perfectly." I pushed my chair back, stood up, and walked out of that dining room. Derek followed me 30 seconds later. We drove home in silence. That night, I started making phone calls. To lawyers, to accountants, to the county records office, because Patricia had made one critical mistake. The house we were sitting in, the one she'd hosted Thanksgiving in, the one she'd lorded over me for years. She didn't own it anymore. We did. She'd signed it over to Derek 2 years ago to avoid estate taxes, and she'd just told me I wasn't family in a house that was legally mine. 3 months later, Patricia called Derek crying. We'd given her 60 days to vacate the property, not because we needed the house, because I was done pretending that family meant accepting abuse with a grateful smile. "Your wife is destroying this family," she sobbed through the phone. Derek looked at me. I was sitting on our couch, in our apartment, drinking coffee and reading a book. Calm, peaceful, done. "No, Mom," he said. "You destroyed it 4 years ago. She just finally stopped letting you get away with it." He hung up. She called back 4 times. He didn't answer. That's when I knew I'd married the right man. Just took him a while to prove it. Let me take you back, because this story isn't about a plate or a house. It's about learning that some people will test how much disrespect you'll swallow, and the only way to pass that test is to stop swallowing. If you've ever had in-laws who treated you like an outsider, if you've ever watched your spouse fail to defend you, if you've ever smiled through humiliation because keeping the peace felt easier than demanding respect, this story is for you. I met Derek at a college party when I was 20. He was a senior, I was a sophomore, charming, funny, studying to be an architect. We dated for a year before I met his family. He kept putting it off, which should have been a warning sign. "My mom is a lot," he'd say. "She takes some getting used to." I thought I understood. My own mother could be overbearing sometimes. I figured all mothers were protective of their sons. I had no idea what I was walking into. The first dinner was at Patricia and Richard's house in the suburbs, a beautiful colonial they'd lived in for 30 years. Patricia greeted me at the door with a handshake, not a hug, and looked me up and down like she was appraising livestock. "So you're the one keeping my son so busy," she said. "Not nice to meet you. Not welcome to our home." Just an accusation disguised as small talk. I laughed nervously and said something about Derek being worth the time. She didn't laugh back. Dinner was tense. Patricia asked about my family, my major, my career plans. It felt like a job interview, not a meal. When I mentioned I was studying pre-law, she said, "How ambitious. Most girls are happy just to find a husband." I waited for someone to react. Richard kept eating. Derek's sister Danielle was on her phone. Derek changed the subject to sports. I sat there wondering if I'd heard her correctly. I had. I just hadn't yet learned that Patricia said exactly what she meant and never apologized for any of it. The second dinner, 3 weeks later, she commented on my weight. "You're looking healthy," she said, eyeing my frame. Derek always did like curves, though they do tend to spread after the wedding. I was fit. I ran 3 miles every morning. But suddenly I felt enormous under her gaze. Derek said, "Mom, come on," in a tired voice, like this was an old battle he'd stopped fighting. Patricia just smiled and passed the potatoes. The third dinner, she rearranged the seating so I was at the far end of the table, separated from Derek by his father, his sister, and his aunt who'd dropped by. I could barely hear conversations, couldn't participate in discussions. When I tried to contribute, Patricia would talk over me or redirect the conversation. By dessert, I felt invisible. Derek found me afterward and apologized. "She's just protective," he said. "She'll warm up once she knows you better." She didn't warm up. She calculated. We got engaged after I graduated when I was 22. Derek proposed on a beach in California, just the two of us, perfect and private. When we told his parents, Patricia looked at the ring and said, "That's it? I thought architects made better money." Richard congratulated us quietly. Danielle hugged me and whispered, "Welcome to the family. Good luck." I should have listened to the warning in her voice. Wedding planning was a battlefield. Patricia wanted to control everything: the venue, the flowers, the catering, my dress. When I chose things she didn't like, she'd go behind my back to vendors and try to change orders. She told the florist my roses were tacky and to substitute lilies. I only found out because the florist called to confirm the change. When I confronted Patricia, she said she was just trying to help, that I clearly had no experience planning events of this caliber. I told Derek. He said he'd talk to her. Whatever he said didn't work. The wedding itself was beautiful despite her efforts. But during the reception, I overheard Patricia telling a group of her friends that she'd let the girl have her little day. But the marriage wouldn't last 3 years? Derek came from good stock. He'd realize his mistake eventually. I was standing 3 feet away. She knew I could hear. She didn't care. Our first year of marriage, I tried everything. I invited Patricia to lunches she canceled last minute. I sent thoughtful gifts for holidays that went unacknowledged. I complimented her home, her cooking, her garden. Nothing worked. She remained cold, critical, dismissive. She'd visit our apartment and find fault with everything. The decor was cheap. The neighborhood was questionable. When I cooked for her, she'd take 1 bite and push the plate away. "I'm watching my figure," she'd say. Unlike some people. Year 2, I started law school while working part-time. I was exhausted, stretched thin, barely keeping up. Patricia's response was to increase the demands. Sunday dinners became mandatory. Missing one meant weeks of guilt trips and passive-aggressive comments about wives who didn't prioritize family. I'd show up running on 4 hours of sleep, try to participate, and get shut down, or ignored. Derek would sit there, caught between us, never quite taking a side. "She's my mother," he'd say when I complained. "What do you want me to do?" I wanted him to defend me. He wanted peace. We couldn't both have what we wanted. Year 2 was also when the house transfer happened. Patricia and Richard wanted to avoid estate taxes. Richard was in poor health, heart problems, and they'd been advised to start transferring assets. They signed the house over to Derek. All of it. Their names came off the deed. His went on. They'd continue living there, of course. It was just paperwork. Derek told me about it casually. I asked if I should be on the deed too, since we were married. He said his parents were more comfortable with just his name, given how new our relationship was. New. 2 years of marriage and I was still new. I let it go. Had law school to worry about. Year 3, Patricia started what I called the food games. My portions were slightly smaller than everyone else's. The best pieces of meat went to others first. Then it escalated. She'd make dishes she knew I was allergic to and act surprised when I couldn't eat them. She'd forget to set a place for me until I was standing awkwardly while everyone else sat down. She'd serve appetizers in the living room, and somehow I'd never get offered any, always conveniently in the bathroom or getting a drink when the tray passed. Death by 1,000 cuts, all delivered with plausible deniability. That was also when I started keeping records. Not consciously at first, just writing things down so I didn't feel crazy. Dates, comments, incidents. A log of every slight, every insult, every moment Patricia had made me feel like nothing. I didn't know what I'd do with it. I just needed proof that I wasn't imagining things. That same year, Richard died. Heart attack in his sleep. Patricia was devastated. Suddenly she needed help, attention, support. And who was supposed to provide it? The wife she'd spent years despising. I showed up anyway, helped plan the funeral, handled logistics, cooked meals, cleaned the house, sat with her while she cried, not because I'd forgiven her, because Derek needed me to, because I thought maybe tragedy might make her see me differently. A week after the funeral, she criticized the casserole I'd made, said the vegetables were overcooked, said her friends had noticed, and it was embarrassing. I'd spent 4 hours making that casserole while juggling law school and work. She dismissed it in one sentence. Year 4, I graduated law school at 26 and passed the bar on my first attempt. When I told Patricia at a family dinner, she said, "How nice. Though I don't know why anyone would hire a lawyer who's barely out of school." I'd just achieved something I'd worked toward for years. She dismissed it in one sentence. Derek said, "Mom, that's not cool." Not a defense, just a weak objection she ignored completely. I got hired at a good firm, started building a career, started making real money, and something shifted in Patricia. Before, she'd been dismissive. Now she was openly hostile. I think she'd expected me to fail. When I succeeded instead, she got meaner. Comments about my appearance became constant. She critiqued me in front of extended family, in front of strangers at events. The Thanksgiving incident came that November. I was 26, had been with Derek for 6 years, married for 4. 4 years of trying. 4 years of being the bigger person, the peacemaker, the one who swallowed insults for the sake of keeping Derek's family intact. And she put an empty plate in front of me and said I wasn't family loud enough for the whole table to hear. I didn't make a scene, didn't cry, didn't yell. I smiled, said I understood, and walked out. Derek caught up to me in the driveway. "She didn't mean it like that." I turned around and looked at him. Really looked. At the man I'd loved for 6 years. The man who'd watched his mother mistreat me and done nothing but ask her to please stop. "How did she mean it, Derek?" He couldn't answer. We drove home in silence. I wasn't angry anymore. I was just done. That night, I pulled out my laptop and started researching. The house, the deed, the transfer that had happened 2 years ago. I found the property records online. Derek was the sole owner. No mortgage. House was worth about $700,000 in the current market. Patricia had signed it over to avoid taxes, expecting to live there forever with no interference from the son who'd never once stood up to her. I printed out the deed, highlighted Derek's name, left it on the kitchen counter. When he saw it the next morning, he was confused. "What is this?" I poured myself coffee. Calm, steady. I'd barely slept, but I felt more awake than I had in years. "That's the deed to your mother's house, except it's not her house anymore. It's yours." He stared at it. "I know that. We did the transfer years ago." Your mother told me last night that I'm not family, in front of everyone, with an empty plate. He winced. I know. I'm sorry. I should have said something. You've been saying that for 4 years. I sat down across from him. She lives in a house you own, that we own, since we're married and this is a community property state. She treats me like garbage, and she does it from a position she thinks is untouchable because she assumes you'll never hold her accountable. I'm done assuming the same thing. Either we evict her, or I'm filing for divorce and taking half the value of that house in the settlement. Your choice. His face went through shock, anger, confusion, fear, and finally, something that looked like relief. I sat there sipping my coffee, listening to him schedule a consultation, and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Seen. Finally. Actually seen. The next 3 months were chaos. Patricia got the notice and lost her mind. Called Derek screaming about betrayal, about manipulation, about how I'd poisoned him against his own mother. She called me directly, leaving voicemails I saved but didn't return. She called Danielle, who surprised everyone by saying, "Mom, you've been terrible to her since day one. This isn't shocking." She called extended family trying to rally support. Some took her side, most stayed quiet. A few reached out to me privately to say they'd seen how she treated me, and were sorry no one had ever said anything. The lawyer explained Patricia's options. She could fight the eviction, but she'd lose. The deed was clear. Derek owned the property. She had no lease, no legal right to remain. She'd signed it over clean, assuming her son would never enforce his ownership. That assumption was wrong. She tried negotiating, asked to stay for a year to find somewhere new. Derek said 60 days. She asked for financial help with relocation. Derek said she had savings from the estate, plus Social Security, plus investments. She could afford to rent an apartment. She tried guilt, tears, reminders of childhood moments, accusations that I'd brainwashed her son. Nothing worked. For the first time in his life, Derek held a boundary. And once he started, he didn't stop. Moving day, I didn't go to the house. Didn't need to witness it. Derek helped coordinate movers. Patricia went to her new apartment, a nice place in a senior community 20 minutes away. She had everything she needed. Just not the house she'd lorded over everyone for 30 years. After she left, we went to the house. Stood in the empty living room where I'd been ignored and criticized and made to feel small for 4 years. Derek was quiet. I should have done this sooner, he finally said. Years ago, the first time she treated you badly. Yes, I said. You should have. I'm sorry. I know. Does it matter? That I'm sorry? I thought about it. About 4 years of apologies that changed nothing. About finally seeing action instead of words. It's starting to, I said. We renovated the house over the next months, made it ours. Light colors, open spaces, modern touches. A home that Patricia would never set foot in again. She asked once if she could visit. Derek said maybe someday. Someday never came. Patricia's new apartment is fine. She has friends there, activities, a community. She's not suffering, just not dominating. She and Derek talk occasionally, brief calls about logistics. I haven't spoken to her since Thanksgiving. Don't plan to. My life now is peaceful in a way it never was before. Derek and I are stronger than ever, bound not just by love, but by the moment he chose me over his mother's cruelty. We host dinners at the house, friends and chosen family who get full plates and warm welcomes. Sometimes I set the table and remember standing in Patricia's dining room holding an empty plate, being told I wasn't family. Then I fill everyone's plate generously and think about how wrong she was. I still have that plate, actually. The one she gave me that Thanksgiving. I took it when we cleaned out the house. It sits on a shelf in our pantry. Empty, chipped, ordinary. A reminder that I survived 4 years of someone trying to make me feel worthless and came out owning her house and her son's loyalty. Not revenge, just consequences. She spent 4 years treating me like I didn't matter. I spent 60 days proving I did. Do I regret taking the house? Not for 1 second. Do I regret forcing Derek to choose? No. He needed to choose. For 4 years he'd operated like there was a third option, where his mother could abuse me and our marriage could continue. There was never a third option. I'm 27 now, a practicing attorney, own a beautiful home with my husband, built a... If you've ever swallowed disrespect for the sake of peace, and then realized peace built on your silence isn't peace at all, this is for you. You don't owe anyone graciousness when they hand you cruelty. You don't owe anyone access to your life when they've proven they'll only use it to diminish you. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is smile, walk away, and let the consequences you're legally entitled to speak louder than any argument ever could. Tell me in the comments, have you ever had in-laws who treated you like you weren't family? What did you do about it? I read every story. And if you want more stories about people who stopped accepting empty plates and started demanding full seats at the table, subscribe. Sometimes the best revenge isn't loud. It's a moving truck in the driveway and a deed with your name on it.